Hello, and welcome to Germination's webinar that looks at cereal pests and products that can effectively protect both wheat and barley. My name is Julie Deering, and I'll be serving as your moderator for today. First, I'd like to send a big thank you to our sponsors who made this webinar possible: 2020 Seed Labs, Bayer CropScience, Canterra Seeds, SeCan, and Syngenta. I have a few housekeeping items to go over. This webinar is being recorded and will be made available on germination.ca following the event. For audio quality purposes, all microphones have been muted with the exception of speakers. If you have any questions or comments, please share them in the chat box and I'll make note of them. Here's a quick lineup of what's in store for you today. First, Sarah Foster of 2020 Seed Labs is going to start us off by identifying the pests that should be top of mind when it comes to growing wheat and barley. Then we'll transition and focus on seed treatment solutions. Here we'll hear from Nathan Claessens of Bayer CropScience and Nathan Klages of Syngenta. Following that, we'll take a look at special considerations for the application of seed treatments, and then we'll also touch upon management tips for creating credible strip trials before rounding things out with a 5 to 10 minute question and answer session. So let's go ahead and get started. Our first speaker is Sarah Foster of 2020 Seed Labs, where she serves as President and Senior Seed Analyst. Sarah started 2020 Seed Labs which is the first fully independent accredited seed laboratory in 1989 in Nisku, Alberta. In her position, she works extensively with government, farmers, and industry, and is one of the most experienced seed analysts in North America, having completed accreditation for the United Kingdom, United States, and Canada. Sarah was the recipient of the Canadian Seed Trade Association's 2013 Seed Achievement Award and has held various executive positions with the Commercial Seed Analyst Association of Canada, including National President. She is also involved in other committees and currently works on the Canadian Methods and Procedures with the Canadian Food Inspection Agency and the International Seed Testing Association Vigor Committee. And with that, I'll turn it over to Sarah. Sarah, what do we need to be most concerned about?
Well, we have a number of, first of all, thank you for the introduction. Today I'd like to go through some of the things that we do here in the laboratory that we've identified as being some of the diseases that are of economic importance. And as I go through my presentation, I think it'll come quite clear what those diseases are and how we can work with the chemical companies to overcome some of the issues. So 2020 Seed Labs, as you say, has been in business since 1989, and we're fully accredited for all 20 crop tables in the Canadian grade tables. And essentially what we do, we're looking at seed quality. And to obtain information about seed quality, we need to be doing germination, purity, and vigor. And a big part of it is seed health. And there's two different ways that we can identify seed health. One is through molecular analysis, and the other is through just what we call traditional plate testing. Now, when there are diseases, healthy plants are able to carry out their physiological functions normally. But when there are diseases present, they interfere with these functions and reduce the plant growth and often cause plant death. Now, in the laboratory, we see seed, obviously, more than anything. And as I say, we have two methods for detecting seed-borne pathogens, and each of these methods has its own pros and cons. The molecular test, well, with our molecular testing, we can use either PCR or qPCR, ELISA, or DNA sequencing. And obviously, with molecular, it's a lot more sensitive and it's more specific to the pathogen or to whatever it is that we're looking for in terms of whether it's, varietal identification and that type of thing. But we have a very good, quick turnaround for results, and we get a positive and a negative result on a molecular test rather than getting a percentage of infected seed. Now, traditional disease testing, which is what we've been using for quite a long time, is where we place sterilized plant tissue onto the growth medium. And this can allow us to test for a larger number of fungi in one single test, whereas with a PCR we'd be only looking for one specific pathogen. So with the plate test, we developed a technique or a test that we've now called, we've now called the fungal screen. And you can see at the bottom here, we've got 4 plates that have various different colored colonies on them. And this is where we're saying that we can look for specific pathogens. Now, the big thing with plate testing, the accuracy of the plate really depends on the skill of the analyst or the pathologist, and contamination could be a problem, and they are fairly lengthy for turnaround, so it can take up to 7 days to get your results. But the procedure for disease testing in this particular way is obviously getting a subsample from the sample that comes in. Very important to get a representative sample. The seed is then surface sterilized for 5 minutes in a 2% bleach solution, and it's dried in a laminar flow hood, which can take up to 3 hours. And then the seed is placed onto a specific growth medium that's known to promote the growth of that particular disease. And in most cases, we're using PDA, which is a potato dextrose agar, and our technique and our rules is that we put 10 seeds per plate, so 20 plates, we've got 200 seeds. Going further into the procedure, the seed is incubated at 22 degrees with white light and for 5 to 7 days. And we analyze the colonies with a dissecting stereoscope and compound microscope. So we're looking at either colonies, the morphology of a colony, or the morphology of spores. Now, just backing up a little bit, the Canadian grade tables only has one disease that's actually accredited and that we have to actually do, and it's true loose smut. And I think we tend to forget about that because there are so many other diseases that we're finding. And as we've grown and evolved as a seed lab, and I speak for all seed labs, we find different diseases in different areas. But true loose smut, and everybody needs to remember this, true loose smut is the only disease that's actually part of a grade table and actually can affect the grade in barley. So it's 2% for a certified 1 and it's 4% for a certified 2, and I believe it's 6% for common. So that is the only disease that's actually regulated, and it pretty much goes up and down depending on environment, and diseases are very much affected by environment. Some varieties are more susceptible, but this little graph here shows the number of positive samples that we've found since 2006, and you can see the levels do go up and down very much depending on the environment. Now, the biggest issue of all for disease in Canada across the prairie provinces is Fusarium graminearum, and there are essentially two tests. In our case, our default test is the PCR because of the increased sensitivity and quick turnaround. And so all samples that test positive on a DNA, in our case, get transferred to a plate in order to quantify the infection. So in Alberta, for example, we have to be able to quantify the infection because we have a zero tolerance. Everywhere else, like Manitoba or Saskatchewan, they're aware of it, but they're not particularly too worried about the actual level. Because there are ways that they can counter that by using seed treatments and crop rotation. Now, what we do here in Alberta is if we know we have infected seed lot, we'll skip the DNA and go right to the plate. So this is typically what we would see on a plate. And this is where the idea of the fungal screen was actually born, because there are a number of different colonies on here that have affected this particular wheat sample. But what we're looking at here right now is the Fusarium graminearum, and this is the pink colonies. So why is Fusarium such an issue? It's essentially one of the worst diseases affecting cereals in Canada, and it can affect not only durum wheat but common wheat, barley, oats and rye, and it's considered to be one of the most serious of the Fusarium species because it causes the highest losses and produces the most mycotoxins. And also causes shriveled, discolored grains, which we've come to know as FDK, or Fusarium damaged kernels, or tombstone. And the thing to keep in mind that in the presence of Fusarium graminearum, we do find high levels of mycotoxins that lead to DON, and which is commonly called a vomitoxin. Now, the worst thing about Fusarium graminearum is not only does it affect the germination and the overall quality of the seed, but it's really useless in terms of trying to use it for feed. Hogs, for example, can't tolerate it in their feed rations. So when Fusarium is really heavy, you'll see a pink, what's the word I'm looking for? Discoloration in the crease, and in the field the symptoms will be fully or partially prematurely bleached heads, as you see here, and you may see some orange to pink discoloration from the spore production. So one of the things that we have to be cautious about is that the infection from the take or root rot or common root rot or other Fusarium species, and we've got lots of blotches here: spot blotch, neck blotch, town spot, Septoria leaf spot, as well as wheat stem maggot and wheat blossom midge damage, can all look like Fusarium head blight. So very important to get the seed tested and find out what it is that you actually have. So here we go. This is a test that we've developed, and this is our cereal fungal screen. And as you can see here, there's lots of different coloured colonies. And what we're looking for, typically on the cereals, and I've got them all listed here in alphabetical order, are Alternaria, Aspergillus, Cladosporium, and so on. And I'm not going to talk too much about that right now because I'm going to go into this in a little bit more detail. The pulses, we also do disease diagnostics on those and can make recommendations for seed treatments. And then, as I say, the other tests are true loose smut and blackleg. So the first one after Fusarium that is of economic importance is Cochliobolus sativus, or what we call common root rot. And these are some of the spores that you will typically see in the presence of Cochliobolus sativus, or root rot. And this is where I was saying it comes down to the skill of the analyst, or the skill of the plant pathologist, in determining that these are actually the right spores. And then that particular fungi leads to this type of symptom. So on the left-hand side, you can see a plant that's completely died, and then the other two images are showing how the roots have been literally robbed by the disease. We have other fusariums, such as Fusarium avinaceum, Fusarium culmorum, and Fusarium poe. And it's important to remember that the one that we are most particularly interested in is actually Fusarium graminearum, but there are other Fusaria species on the plants as well, and found on the seed. And you can see here again, these plates are showing the pink colonies, which indicate that Fusarium could be present. And the next disease that we're interested in is Pyranophora. And again, the spores, and you can see up in the top left-hand corner how the colony is actually forming around what would have typically been a healthy plant, but in this case you see the colony forming around the plant. Pyranophora is an important fungal disease on wheat because it leads to net blotch, leaf stripe, tan spot, and red smudge. And this does lead to fairly high incidences of yield loss. Septoria is also another important fungal disease. And again, we're looking at spores here, and it just shows some of the colonies that we pick up on the plate testing. And Septoria leads to leaf and gloom blotch. Now, the diseases that I've just spoken about are what we call pathogenic, so they're of economical importance. And during our fungal screen, we will categorize our findings into different areas. So there's the pathogenic, there's the saprophytic, and then there are just storage pathogens. And so this is something that we've done that actually allows our clients to select the right seed treatment. And this is very, very important because we believe that as long as the incidence of the disease isn't over the threshold that we've come to determine as being of economic importance, leading to no emergence, loss of vigor, loss of quality, that type of thing, we can make recommendations on different seed treatments. And also cases where we won't make recommendations, because if we've gone past the threshold in the level of disease that we don't want, then obviously we're not going to make any recommendations, and we suggest that, you know, new seed is sourced. But you can see here potential yield losses from these diseases is especially high, and it's important to be able to identify these through the fungal screen. Now, something that we do here is we'll treat up a sample to make sure that the disease, the seed treatment is actually working effectively on the disease. And so this shows the application of a seed treatment that's been done well. And it's important that and I'm sure both of our Nathans can speak to this, but it's very important that the application is done according to the proper rate. And here's an example of something that's not been done well. And in this case, if this was infected with disease, the disease would escape. So here we have our classic fungal screen again. This is an untreated infected wheat. And what I've done here is we do a lot of work in the laboratory where we follow through with untreated infected samples and treat them up. So here you see the difference between the untreated and the treated. And this is the same sample. So we've followed this particular sample right the way through to the end. So you can see very clearly that the seed treatment has in fact had a huge impact over controlling the pathogens. This is what the sample looked like in the germination test. So this is just a white paper blotter with 100 seeds on it. And here we've got a number of different pathogens, but predominantly Fusarium. And again, at this point, excuse me, we don't know if this is actually Fusarium graminearum or not. And that's where we would have put this in as a candidate for the fungal screen. And here you can see this is just a mess. If we saw something like this, we wouldn't recommend that we go much further unless we find out what species are actually on here. And so then we've treated it, and huge difference, and it's really cleaned things up, and it's allowed the seedlings to develop properly. And then to test it a little further, we put it into a vigor test. And again, it's very, very important to make sure that we're doing both a germ and a vigor, to make sure that both ends of the spectrum are indeed met. Germination is a test that tests the seed under optimum conditions, whereas vigor is the exact opposite, and it's looking at how seed will perform in the field in cool conditions. And I'm just going to go very, very quickly now. Here are the rest of the fungal pathogens that we see, and this category now is the saprophytes, and these are important because even though they're weaker, when they're present on the seed, they do need to be taken care of with seed treatment. So all of these particular pathogens or fungi are generally on the label of any of the seed treatments that are out there on the market today. And Cladosporium leading to blotch and that type of thing, on both on seed head and on the seed. Epicoccum, which is quite common, seen probably more frequently. Now, what we've been seeing over the years is we've been tracking the number of positive Fusarium graminearum tests that we get. And here you can see there's been a steady increase in the incidence of Fusarium graminearum over the years. So since 2007 to 2015, we've seen more and more tests coming back positive. This represents Alberta, but I will speak to the rest of the provinces. So generally speaking, 1 in 10 samples test positive for Fusarium graminearum. And in other provinces, this is typical of what we see. Alberta is still holding pretty steady. We've had a huge testing program here. We've been aware of Fusarium because it became a part of the Pest Control Act, and as I say, we do have a tolerance for it. So we've been testing very, very diligently and making sure that samples that do come back positive, if they're within the tolerance of 0.5, as long as you're using it on your own farm, you can treat and go ahead and seed it. You can see Saskatchewan and Manitoba, again, a lot higher than what we have in Alberta. And this is primarily due to the fact that the environment is perfect in those provinces for the presence of Fusarium graminearum. And Fusarium graminearum isn't just specific to wheat. As I say, actually durum wheat is probably one of the most susceptible, and common wheat also susceptible. And you can see oats not particularly susceptible at all, and then triticale and barley being fairly susceptible. Now, this map, again, we've been tracking since 2007, and this shows the number of samples that have been testing positive with Fusarium. So you can see it was predominantly southern Alberta that started to have this problem because it's a heavy wheat growing area. Also, seed that's grown under irrigation is also more predominantly affected. And as we went along, this will take us up to 2015, but you'll see how the areas start to fill in with red and how the disease has started to move throughout the province. And again, still, you know, in 2011, still very much around southern Alberta, but a huge jump in 2012, and that again was largely due to environment, and environment is a very important component of the disease triangle. In 2013, it was found up in the north, and 2014, again, environment changes it, and you know, it does move, and of course this just represents the seed that we've tested. There may be other laboratories that can speak differently to this, but essentially I think we represent a large area of the marketplace, and I think we can speak to the fact that Fusarium, you know, is on the move, and it's very much here to stay. 2015 numbers, we've only been testing for about 6 weeks, so we don't have everything tested yet. And you can see that it's still pretty much in that southern Alberta area. Now, this is a Fusarium risk, and this is, again, tracking since 2007, and the yellow represents a positive DNA and a negative plate. And essentially what that means is that the disease may just be surface, so it's spores on the seed that aren't being picked up on the plate test, where they are being picked up on the DNA. So very, very important, if you don't know that you have Fusarium, it's important to test with the DNA. And again, you can see one of the things that we recommend is if an area is at risk, the DNA is a very good early warning test, and it allows our seed growers to make decisions about rotations and that type of thing. And you can see here, you know, much of the southern part and central part of the province are red. And it moves fairly steadily. And then here we are again, as I say, we've only been testing for 6 weeks. And this is the cumulative data from 2007 to 2014. So there's areas that we're watching that we now know are at risk. And if we're able to get that message out, we'd like our growers to continue to test and also use seed treatments. So the biggest thing here, the take-home message is get a fungal screen and a Fusarium DNA, know what you're dealing with. And when you think of, you know, the cost of the analysis, it's minimal compared to what your potential yield losses can be. And get the most information that you can, and be aware that seed-borne pathogens can cause significant losses year after year, and make sure, is it on an acceptable level? And that acceptable level comes clear when you get this data that will give you from a complete seed health profile. And this is where I was saying that we categorize everything into different areas of being pathogenic, saprophytic, or storage molds. So what can we do? Take action, use the best management practices, rotate, use crop rotation, choose your field locations carefully, use seed with the lowest levels of pathogens, avoid planting infected seed into areas that don't have any history of disease. You can always increase your seeding rates and always be aware that there are resistant varieties available. Obviously controlling volunteers and keeping equipment clean, and use a seed treatment that's registered for these pathogens, and spray at the right time for the right pathogens, and obviously using the right fungicide. So in conclusion, we always recommend you buy the best quality product to start and have the best quality seed. Make really informed decisions. We're all about educating and giving our clients the most comprehensive information we can. Just the germination and a Fusarium don't give you the whole story. We do want you to consider vigor and the full fungal screen, and know your options. Compare, alternatives that you might have available to you, and make really good decisions. So I'll entertain any questions at the end, obviously, but thank you. I'll hand you now back to Julie.
Great, thanks for that update, Sarah. That's a lot of information to take in. Now let's take a look at some of the different products that are effective in controlling these pests. Our next two speakers are Nathan Clausen of Bayer CropScience and Nathan Klages of Syngenta. I'm getting some feedback. Are other people getting that feedback as well?
Yes, I am.
Sorry, we'll try to keep on going, but if it gets too bad, we'll stop again. So I'll just repeat that one more time. Our next two speakers are Nathan Clausen of Bayer CropScience and Nathan Klages of Syngenta. Nathan Clausen is a seed growth specialist in the southern region of Manitoba for Bayer CropScience. He grew up on a family farm in southern Manitoba, studied agriculture at the University of Manitoba, and has spent the past 19 years in the ag industry, both with grain and ag retail companies as well as seed companies. Today, he's married with 3 kids, coaches hockey for a local minor hockey association, and enjoys all sports. Then we'll hear from Nathan Klages, who is based out of Guelph, Ontario, and serves as seed care and inoculants product lead for Syngenta Canada. In this role, he is responsible for providing leadership and developing strategies to bring seed treatment products to market. Throughout his 11-year tenure at Syngenta, Nathan has held several sales and marketing positions, giving him a well-rounded perspective of the ag industry in Canada. Nathan also farms part-time in Grey County, Ontario, giving him a deep understanding of grower needs and the challenges faced at the field level. Nathan earned a Bachelor of Science in Agriculture from the University of Guelph and is a graduate of the Advanced Agriculture Leadership Program. Now, Nathan Clausen, let's hear about the solutions you find work best in today's environment.
Great, thanks, Julie. I'd just like to start by saying that any yield potential that's lost at time of seeding or prior to emergence cannot be mitigated by any other management practice throughout the year. So you can't add more fertilizer, you can't spray any chemicals over the top to make up for a poor plant stand or uneven emergence. So that's why it's really important to use good, clean seed and a seed treatment to protect your seed investment. At Bayer, we offer 2 seed treatment products for cereals, Raxel Pro and Raxel Pro Shield. Raxel Pro is made up of 3 components, tebuconazole, prothioconazole, and metalaxyl. These 3 actives allow you to get contact and systemic protection of seed and soil-borne diseases. As Sarah mentioned, Fusarium is spreading across the prairies. It's not limited to Manitoba anymore. Having a product like Raxel Pro allows you to get any Fusarium that's on the seed with its contact activity, as well as any soil-borne Fusarium that's in your fields. And as you can see on the screen, I've got a couple of Petri dish comparisons that show wheat seed that was infected with Fusarium and the power of Raxel Pro to clean up that seed with its contact activity. Raxel Pro Shield is really Raxel Pro with the addition of Stress Shield, which is a imidacloprid. It's an insecticide that has activity on wireworms. So you get all the disease control benefits of Raxel Pro with the additional benefit of wireworm activity. Along with insect control, we also have seen more intensive tillering and higher plant densities on cereals treated with Raxel Pro Shield. Picture I've got up on the screen is actually a demo we did this spring in eastern Manitoba on winter wheat, and you can see if you look near the crown of the plant, you'll see thicker stems, just more robust plant growth, bigger root mass with the addition of the Stress Shield in with your Raxel. And that's something we see consistently with Raxel Pro Shield in cereals. The last point I'll make about Raxel Pro and Pro Shield is their formulation. They are both microdispersion formulations. The easiest way to explain a microdispersion is to think of an Aero chocolate bar and the tiny bubbles in the inside of it. If you were to look at Raxel Pro and Pro Shield, the formulation on a microscopic level, that's what you would see, is just lots of tiny bubbles that make up the formulation, and that helps you for better seed coverage. Microdispersions are also more temperature stable. That's key when you're treating early in the season, in the spring when you could get morning temperatures of 2 and 3 degrees, and then as you treat later in the day, temperature warms up to 10, 12, maybe 15 degrees, that your application rates stay consistent and stay accurate, because the viscosity of your seed treatment will stay the same. It's not going to be a little thicker in the morning when it's cooler and then get a little thinner in the afternoon when it warms up. So it's key just to make sure that you're able to maintain consistency throughout the day when you're treating cereals. And I'll turn it back to you for now, Julie.
Great. I think I had myself muted. Nathan, thanks for your presentation, and now we're ready to hear from Nathan Klages about the products that he's working with there at Syngenta.
Okay, thank you very much, and thanks for the opportunity to chat with you here today. So I too am just going to speak about 2 key products from Syngenta, one being Cruiser Vibrance Quattro, the other Vibrance Quattro. Really, the opportunity that we have with both of these formulations is to offer a simplified set of products to the grower so they can get the best possible treatment they can on their seed to protect that investment. It's pretty important, as has been shown here, in terms of the diseases and some of the insect pressure that is being faced by growers. So it's important to have good products that are going to try and meet those needs in terms of control. So if I think about the first product, Vibrance Quattro, that's our fungicide-only solution. It's going to cover a very broad range of diseases in terms of what are being faced from growers in Western Canada across all cereal crops. So as was mentioned, it's important to know your challenges, and a lot of this depends on the environment. But what we've tried to do with Vibrance Quattro is bring together the most comprehensive, broad-based control type package here in terms of disease control. So we've gone through some changes in our portfolio over time, but really gearing towards getting this Vibrance Quattro, which is one of the most tested formulations in our portfolio, and it's built for Canadian growers. So we've added in fludioxonil, really to get that seed-borne control of Fusarium that we've been talking about. We've increased our Sidaxine rate, and Sidaxine is the Vibrance component that you've heard about. So that's really going to help to improve our control of true loose smut and Rhizoctonia. In addition to that, also added some more metalaxyl M. So all of these things are very important, and there's a full list behind that in terms of the other diseases controlled. But it's just as important in terms of the actual application, and that's where we've done a lot of testing with this product to make sure, it's a premix formulation, RTA, fast dry time with no dust off. So that's really important in terms of getting that good application. Now, the other product I want to just mention here is the Cruiser Vibrance Quattro. And really the only difference between Cruiser Vibrance Quattro and Vibrance Quattro is that addition of Cruiser 5FS. So in this example, what we've done for Cruiser Vibrance Quattro is add an additional 20 grams in total of thiamethoxam to the Vibrance Quattro. So it's a premix formulation, so you get all those benefits of Vibrance Quattro, plus now you've got the 20 grams of thiamethoxam in there for that, in-season suppression of wireworms, which are, we're certainly seeing as we do different tests across the West, populations of wireworms are tending to increase in certain areas, and so we wanted to make sure that, Cruiser Vibrance Quattro was going to be able to help address that that challenge that's being faced by growers in those fields. So that's why we've added in the 20 grams total, and that's Cruiser Vibrance Quattro. I'll turn it back to you, Julie.
Great, thanks, Nathan. It's clear that both companies are working to deliver solutions in this area and stay ahead of the disease pressure. What are some of the special considerations that we have, or that retailers and farmers need to take into account as they're treating cereal seeds? And Nathan Clausen, I'll let you be the first to go on that.
Okay. Thanks, Julie. I really just wanted to key on three main points that I've seen on farm and at retail. And I guess the point I'd make is you can have the best seed treatments in the world, but if you apply them poorly or incorrectly, they really become ineffective. And just 3 points for consideration I'd like everybody to consider to maximize their seed treatment application and their investment is the use of good, clean seed. Consider the temperature of your seed grain that you're treating in the spring, and the seed density. And the importance of clean seed, as you can see by some of my pictures, I got a sample of some very dirty barley seed, and you'll notice that the seed treatment tends to want to stick to the dust. And if it's stuck to the dust, it's not on your seed, and you're not getting a whole lot of you're not going to get a whole lot of bang for your buck on your seed treatment. The other problem when it gets stuck on your dust, or if you're using clean or dirty seeds or cereal seeds, is you'll notice you'll get buildup on your metering rollers, and which turns into lumps and dust, or the dust and the lumps clump together, and you're going to end up plugging your air seeder, or your producers are going to have trouble. So understate the importance of good clean seed to start before you start treating. Temperature. If you've got seeds in the bin and they sit there over the winter, obviously in our winters, your seed grain is going to be very cold. When you start treating in the spring and you start using treatments that are probably warmer than the seed coming out of the bin, you might experience what they call a flash freeze. So your seed treatment is going to get on your seed, but it's going to flash freeze on there, and as it goes through the auger and ends up in your truck, it'll start to re-wet, or basically melt back on the seed as it warms up. And that's fine. The only consideration you'll want to give is you want to make sure that seed that's treated sits on the truck a little longer to allow it to dry a little longer, to make sure it stays on the seed. The picture of the auger I have there on the flighting is what could happen if a producer tries to auger that back into a bin for storage, or into his air seeder or wherever. The treatment, if it's wet, will get on your auger and your flighting, and there could be some buildup. And again, if it's on your flighting, it's not on your seed where it needs to be. And lastly, the importance of seed density and understanding the weight of the seed you're actually treating. We've got a brief example on the right-hand side. If we tend to assume that wheat seed, the standard conversion is a 60-pound bushel. However, when you're using clean treated grain, typically your weights are quite a bit higher. And in this example, if you've calibrated your equipment for a 60-pound per bushel sample of wheat, and it's actually 68 pounds, and your customer comes in for 600 bushels of seed grain, and he actually ends up with almost 42,000 pounds of seed. And really what that means is you've underapplied seed treatment by about 13%. Again, not getting the biggest bang for your buck. So it's very important to understand your density of your seed, so you can set your treating equipment accurately and get the correct rate on the seed. And that was all I had, Julie. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Nathan. Nathan Klages, do you have anything that you'd like to add when it comes to special considerations that retailers and growers need to keep in mind?
Yes, for sure. You know, just a couple of key points, and these aren't rocket science, but it is, as I think was kind of pointed out a bit earlier, your seed treatment is only as good as your application, right? So it's important that you just really consider the seed flow rate, your seed treatment rate, to make sure that it's being properly applied, as Nathan mentioned there. So look at your primary application just to make sure that that first initial application is going well, and then also the secondary mixing. In most situations, that's really where you're going to see that true visual ability. And so take a look at that first little bit of finished product before you treat too much. I mean, I think it goes without saying that it's just important that you don't go too far along. To Nathan's example that he gave there, and you get to the end and you have not applied the right amount. And then maintain good records. It's very key, of course, that you keep records of all of this so that you can see where and the amounts that were applied, so you make sure that you can look at that, and then when you look at the results in the field, you can see if you were undertreating or overtreating, what impact that might have. And I just have a couple pictures here in terms of, you know, what does good treated seed look like, and the benefits of what that can provide. As I mentioned, you know, you're only as good as that application, so it's very important that you do a great job of trying to do that. That's it, Julie.
Great, thanks, Nathan. It's clear that application is key in terms of product performance. Now let's switch gears a little bit here and transition to focus on managing or management tips for creating credible strip trials. So I think there is an opportunity here for retailers to help farmers better understand the benefits of seed treatments by using strip trials. Not only that, it's a way to get farmers onto your property and to check out some of the products that you're carrying. And so what I'd like to do is start off and just ask, you know, what are some of the management tips or best management practices that you have for retailers who may be looking to create a credible strip trial that hasn't done this before. And so, excuse me, Sarah, I know you said you had some tips prepared, and so what I'd like to do is go ahead and start with you, and I will try to capture some of the points.
Yes. Well, I have a number of points here, Julie. Well, obviously, it's really important that in a strip tile are usually bigger than just the usual research plots. So you're actually getting a better representative. So that's important. So you want larger area. I think number one thing is that you make sure that the varieties that you're using are recommended for that particular area. There's no point trying something in an area that you know isn't going to work. You want it to show well, and you want it to be representative for that particular region. Always make sure that you know what was seeded previously. No different than a seed grower having field history. So make sure that you're not putting something in that you know, sort of pulses on pulses or wheat on wheat, that type of thing. So make sure you've got good rotation. I think it's always a good idea if you locate the field close to the road. Not only is it more visible to people passing, but you're not opening up your land for anybody to come onto and you know, basically be driving on private property type thing. I think it's important that when you select the seed or the varieties that you want, that it's been tested for germination and vigor. I mean, obviously you want to make sure that you're going to get the plant establishment and seeding rate and everything else that you need. And also, probably from a husbandry point of view, plant winter wheat around the plots. And I think those are my probably go-to points in terms of good stewardship for best management practices around strip trials.
Now, tell me why you would plant a weed around the plot.
Because it doesn't head out. It's because winter wheat wouldn't go to head.
Okay. Nathan Claassen, do you have anything to add to these management tips?
Just a couple things. I agree with all of Sarah's comments, and if you can replicate your strips, that's always a benefit. Make sure you're in a uniform area in the field. Try and avoid the highs and the lows in the field, and even different soil conditions if you have sandy knolls and lower clay areas. Probably the biggest thing is have a protocol set out ahead of time in spring to really get a good idea of what you're trying to measure and how you're going to do it. And that usually eliminates a lot of problems once you get into actually doing the trials. And the one thing I would try not to do is try and test too many things within the same trial. Keep it simple. Pick one thing out that you're trying to accomplish or to test, and leave it at that. And that would be my feedback for the group, Julie.
Great, thank you. Let's turn that around and kind of flip it upside down, if you will. What, Nathan, what are some of the biggest pitfalls that you see both either retailers or farmers who are doing this, or creating strip trials? What are the biggest pitfalls or mistakes that they might make?
So I would just say, from that perspective, it kind of goes back to what Nathan Claassen was saying there. I mean, you've got to select the best site, and so a pitfall is if it's not an even site, or if partway through the season, you get a bit of a drowned out section, and you don't take that into account at the end when you're looking at your results, because in the end, yield is what's really going to matter, and that's what people are going to see. So you have to document or show where you've got a spot that has some other factor that maybe has limited the yield in that section, so you're not downplaying, or you just so that you're not showing incorrect data.
No, that makes a lot of sense. Sarah or Nathan Claassen, do you have any pitfalls or common mistakes that you see made when you're out working with retailers or farmers?
No, not really.
I would just add that when you do take these to yield, and to make sure your yields are credible, is to make sure you're using all the technology available to you. And with your producers, most guys have the ability to generate yield maps and field maps, and it just adds more credibility to your program if you can provide other customers with that type of information, and to make sure you get some really credible yield data off. There's nothing worse than putting a whole bunch of time and effort into doing strip trials and then not getting any good yield information to share with your customers.
Okay, great. Well, thanks so much for that information. That wraps up that section. And now we'll go ahead and move into our question and answer session as we're approaching the end of the hour. So as I stated earlier, if you have any questions, please type those into the chat box and we'll make sure our speakers get to them. We do have one question already in, and it's directed to Nathan Claassen. And it is, what boosts the vigor in Raxel Pro Shield?
Really, it's the interaction of when the stress shield is being metabolized by your cereal plants, and it breaks down within the plant. It actually blocks a stress response pathway in the plant, and what it really does is it just buys that plant a little extra time that doesn't have to worry about the stresses of diseases or environmental conditions, that it could just establish and get the root system going and really do what it naturally wants to do. Of course, it's not unlimited. If your stresses persist for weeks on end. You know, obviously it's going to break down, but it just helps mitigate some early season stress as it's metabolized in the plant.
Great. Thank you. Okay. I think seeing that's the only question that's come in, and I know we're running short on time here, so I'll just go ahead and wrap things up. Want to take a quick moment to thank our speakers for making time in their busy schedules to share this information. Really appreciate Sarah and Nathan for sharing their expertise, and hopefully you found this information of value. And again, thank you to our sponsors, Bayer CropScience, Canterra Seeds, SeCan, Syngenta, and 2020 Seed Labs for their support. Also, this wouldn't have been possible without a terrific team behind the scenes. Thank you to Jill Holosi, our Director of Digital Strategies, Lynn Roy, our Marketing Manager, and Caleb, our Senior Web Designer. This presentation will be made available online at germination.ca. Thanks again for joining us, and we hope you have a great day.